Welcome to the Generous Business Owner Podcast, where business owners gain inspiration and encouragement to live a legacy, not just leave one. And now your hosts, Jeff Thomas, Alan Barnhart, and Jeff Rutt.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's Generous Business Owner Podcast. My name is Jeff Thomas, and I've got Jeff Rutt with us today. Say hello to the people, Jeff.
Hello to the people.
And we have a very special guest, Matt Hiltz, with us. Matt is the founder and CEO of Hiltz Propane Systems. So, Matt, forgive me, I just have to tell the audience, this is going to be an explosive interview, okay?
But there we go.
Thank you so much. I know that's probably the last thing a propane guy wants to hear. But anyway, this is, pardon the pun, folks, but welcome to the program, Matt.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Jeff, kick us off.
Yes.
Help me out here, will you?
Yeah. Matt, tell us about what it was like growing up in the Hiltz household. What were the younger years like, both in spiritual formation, any businesses while you were in junior high? Talk a little bit about those younger years.
Sure. Yeah. So I probably have a little bit of a unique story. My wife and I moved down to Lancaster, Pennsylvania in 2005, but we were both born and raised in Nova Scotia, Canada. So we grew up 5 minutes apart from one another, didn't meet until we were in our late high school years. But we're brought up there. And growing up, I did grow up in a Christian household and had a lot of really good experiences as far as work ethic. My father was and still is a really hard worker, and instilled that into me in an early age. And you mentioned about even early business opportunities. I for several years had a lawn mowing and landscape company, and I think probably at its peak was maybe 20 clients. But did that for several years, kind of in junior high and up through high school until I went off to college. So. And was able to relinquish those to another friend who was a couple of years behind me, and then he took care of them and so on. So yeah, definitely some business opportunity early on.
Wow, that's definitely a common theme among successful entrepreneurs. Yeah, so talk about your spiritual journey, and then up through your high school and going into your career. Talk a little bit about next steps.
Yeah, sure. Again, I grew up in a Christian home, probably like a lot of younger individuals, attended church and different events, but probably didn't have a real strong relationship. And even through my college years, I went to school for 5 years and did an engineering degree. And probably year two was engaged with a local church, which really helped develop some strong friendships and some relationships that still, even to this day, almost 30 years later, still stay connected with some of those people, which again really helped in getting through those transitional years, I would say.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was my college years, and moved in as soon as we were done college. I think it was. It would have been 2002. I graduated, and then we were married shortly after, my wife Margaret and I. And yeah, we immediately started getting involved in local churches, and thankful for the equal yokeness there and both being believers. That's been a strong part of our story and journey together for sure.
What was how would you describe Nova Scotia's culture growing up? I mean, were there a lot of Christians, or I know now it's pretty rare, unfortunately, but how would you describe that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say even when we were preparing to move to the Lancaster area, and my wife having a mother who was born and raised in Lancaster County, we were pretty aware that it was, I guess, termed like the Bible Belt down in this region. And I would say for sure in Nova Scotia, there probably would be a little bit of a different culture. There certainly is churchgoers. There's a lot of people of routine. And even in my childhood, I would say some of that would have been more of a routine kind of act for sure. The culture in Nova Scotia itself is a very friendly and welcoming culture. I mean, even to this day, we go home and everybody's calling you bud, and just kind of like a arm on the shoulder type of a feeling, which Maybe I don't get that quite as often in different regions, south of the border. But I wouldn't say that that's, always the case as well. I mean, I would even say a lot of the people that I currently gravitate to and a lot of our customer base are, kind of tap you on the shoulder, you know, type of relationships. So it reminds me a lot of my home and growing up.
Oh, okay. So what was the first job out of school? You're still in Canada, right? A couple of years at least.
Still in Canada. So yeah, there's an interesting story there. So my wife and I, married in 2002, did have plans to immediately move to the US. There was some work opportunities. Again, there was some family connection. And it immediately following our wedding, had everything packed up and had visas in place for the work opportunities, and proceeded to the Canadian US border and were denied entry into the US,
Whoa.
which was unexpected. Had a moving truck following us close behind. Little to find out, my wife, who has a mother who's an American citizen, and my wife also being an American citizen, needed to sponsor me to bring me into the country. So they denied us, and we turned around to a 2-year process to actually get our
Wow.
full papers to be able to come into the U.S. and work. So with that, newly married, moved back towards home. We were fortunate. Her family had an apartment available to us, and we both found local jobs and worked for the next 2 years. And maybe possibly the most blessed 2 years as far as being newlyweds and just opportunities to learn to work with others and some management, opportunities for myself that I hadn't previously had. So in hindsight, I'm not sure we were ready to make the move.
Wow.
I'm really curious, sorry.
Yeah.
At what point did you start looking at that as a blessing versus, I'm sure the day you got turned down from going into the US was not the day that you said, "Hey, this is a blessing." At some point, because you just said there was probably a blessing in a couple different ways. Yeah, talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so certainly that day we did not look at that as a blessing, and we were probably extremely scared, if I was to be honest. I don't remember all of the emotions. Also, maybe a little bit of confusion was mixed into that, in that we had worked hard at having things very organized in our eyes, and then in the end we didn't quite have it right. So I would say it was probably years after we finally did relocate and started careers down on the US side that I started realizing just the depth of that couple of extra years to gain experience, how valuable it was. And even to this day, more and more reflecting on those early years, and even in work ethic and the ability to share stories, even with my children and also employees. And be honest with you, that job I took when I went back was sweeping floors on a large commercial construction site, and um, having not been able to respond to what I considered a really good work opportunity, and having just completed a 5-year engineering degree, to be sweeping floors and vacuuming apartments at new construction, probably wasn't the most glamorous job, and it wasn't picturing what I had expected to be doing. But I would say that nobody could sweep a floor or clean an apartment better than I could at that time. And the older gentleman and his wife that owned the commercial construction company noticed that almost immediately. And I had no expectations of doing anything other than that, but I did have desires to do more. And in conversations with them, in a few short months, they were giving me more and more opportunities, and eventually some supervisory positions. And they opened a door to another company that brought me on as a project manager. So within a year, and probably a 1 year to an 18-month period, I was able to work in a project management role. So very quickly elevated, but did that mostly through example and hard work.
It sounds like you said you share that with your current employees. You tell that story a lot. That's a great story of kind of starting
I
from
do,
the
I
bottom.
do, I do at times when, and I guess it's right or strategically, but I do want people to know that no matter what their position is with the company, that if they would, like, and they'll work hard enough, there's a path, right? And
Right.
you have to start somewhere, and I started somewhere. And again, even to this day, I still don't mind getting my hands dirty.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great lesson in that.
Yeah.
Okay, so but okay, a couple of years, you do make it over. What? Do you have a job waiting for you, or do you have to find something when you show up?
So I did immediately, which was pretty cool. My wife had a uncle who was in the propane industry, and so to this point, I have no experience in the industry that last 20 years of my career has been involved in my current business that I have. But he had a need for help, not even a specific position, just a growing company, a fair bit of opportunity, and one of the stories I always tell everyone is when I sat down to interview with him. Again, he wanted me to come on, and at that point, I said, for lack of better terms, didn't care what capacity. He just needed help in so many ways, and asked me. He said, I know your history. I know you a little bit through family. I know your education and your background, and we had already discussed some of my experiences from the past 18 months to 2 years. And he asked, what would you like to do in my company? And for some reason, I looked at him and I said, I'd like to have your job. And why those words came out at the time, but that is just what came off the tip of my tongue. And his comment to me was, well, if that's the case, just spend as much time as you can with me. I'll show you everything you need to do, and maybe someday you will have that role.
It's a kind response.
Yes, and a huge opportunity. 6 years later, decisions were made to move on, and my wife and I decided at that time to start our own company. But the opportunities, the experiences that were gained in that first propane experience were and still are extremely valuable to who I am and my foot in the door into our industry.
So you started Hiltz Propane in 2011, right?
Yes, sir.
So, but you'd only been in the country about 6 years, right?
That's correct.
If I'm doing my math right, you're early 30s, maybe 31, somewhere in there. That's
Just starting a family.
starting a fam. I mean, that is not an easy task. And I know Jeff Rudd's done things like that. It took me a bit longer to start my own business, but what was the impetus for you to be able to kind of have the chutzpah to start it up on your own?
It seems like every step along the way has gone maybe faster than it should have, or faster than, some other examples and other individuals and their experiences. And I think a lot of the times I've just been willing to stick my neck out and just go for it, whether it be, my work ethic for those couple of years with the commercial builders, or my ability to sit in front of a potential job opportunity and be willing to do anything but state, hey, I'll dig a trench, or I want your position. Just, really being I guess probably fairly decisive. Not that the decision to start our own business happened overnight, but I do feel it happened again quickly, and elevated. It you used the term explosive earlier, and I say sometimes how things just blow up, and that's another kind of play on words that isn't great, but there was a lot of timing that played into it. We are talking now, it's late 2000s, and in the propane industry, we have a lot of fuel oil companies that are interested in getting into the business. There's just a lot of growth in that sector, both for home heating, different sources for home heating fuel, industrial, commercial opportunities. So again, the timing was also perfect, just as far as this, the industry in that season of time.
So how is there been a bit of a niche that's developed? How would you describe your niche in the business?
So one of the things that I learned early on, after knowing that the number one most important thing is relationships, both growing relationships, maintaining, sustaining them, and also with I guess an excitement towards the construction, with my engineering background, with a very hands-on approach, I've really gravitated towards equipment. I love cranes, I love tractor trailers, and probably little to no interest in actually selling propane or the fuel. But again, designing, installing the infrastructure was always something that just has really interested me. So again, having a lot of energy towards that, building relationships. I'll tell you, again, work ethic really, has played into this. I'm a hard worker, although sometimes to a fault, and probably some of the lower times along the journey have probably been related to work-life balance and maybe not a great understanding of that or respect for it, especially early on.
Maybe unpack that a little bit because, one of the things Jeff and I always talk about is, a lot of these stories, if you start at the end, it seems like everything was up and to the right, and
Sure.
there's always setbacks. And so I really enjoy hearing that story, even of getting rejected at the border. I talk about a setback, but even
Sure.
in business, 14 years in, what you mind just sharing one of those challenges? Maybe it was the overwork or something else, but what are some of the challenges you've met along the way?
Yeah, I mean, I would even fast forward a little bit to within the last 5 to 6 years, really spending a lot of time. I was introduced to Men of Iron just through some different relationships and had an opportunity to be in a mentorship that has really impacted me in a positive way. And with focusing on, balance and the priorities in my life and things that life happens so quickly. And again, when you're growing a business and you're working and you kind of have your head down and you're in the
Yeah.
trenches, you're not paying attention, and has been an absolute blessing to me. And it took up until, around 2020 for me to really clue in enough to say, hey, you need to focus on this. You need to focus on your faith. You need to focus on your family, and your health, and just so many things that are so important that, when those things are going well, the business will go well. You know what I mean? My career will go well. And encouraged lately with even being involved in several different business groups and opportunities, and in one peer group in particular, seeing 28, 29-year-old young men who are honestly talking the lingo and in peer groups and in mentorships, 15 years prior to me, and how much I wish I could turn back the clock and have had an opportunity or even looked for the opportunity and be more intentional myself back then. So as grow a business, you have children that are, a year, 2 years old being born. With our industry, we operate up and down the East Coast, and we do ship equipment throughout the United States. And I completely had owned the sales up until the last 2 to 3 years with this company. But initially, the amount of travel was just tremendous, both selling and also being one of the hand-on installers and working, some days 7 days a week early on to 6 days a week to 5 days a week, but still a 90 to 100-hour week. Again, my focus was completely on my work and maybe the customers, and then my family and everything else, further on down the list. So
Yeah. So, of course, this is the Generous Business Owner podcast. So, when did you start thinking of how do you, maybe better said, how do you kind of think about using your business platform for generosity?
so even before I get to that, I would even say just the whole idea of generosity has stemmed from just how aware now I am of how blessed we've been with maybe the way I feel at times I've done things backwards, maybe with just my feeling of, again, not having my priorities straight, and maybe some hurt and some discomforts along the way that I certainly know are a result of that. But yet we were continued to be protected. I mean, we are also in a dangerous, industry, and how it feels that in reflection over the last 15 to 20 years, how there's been a hand of protection, not only me, but my family and the workforce. And then to just see how the work over time and the finances has just continued to flow and flow. And even to this season now, where we're a well-established company, we have spent a tremendous amount of time in the last 3 to 4 years really working on sustainability with the company. Been successful, had a lot of opportunity, but did it with a very lean workforce and probably not a lot of focus on structure and process. And after several pushes from extremely strong and valued employees to work towards that, we have done it and spent a lot of time, on that subject. But even through that, the access to just top level employees, and again, the investments that have had to be made, but the finances continue to be there. We recently, in the last 3 years, due to our growth, invested in a new property and a building and expansion project that I will admit has stretched me. I'm very conservative. I don't enjoy debt. I'm not sure everybody enjoys it, but I've always been quite ruthless of paying off debt, and just I don't like to owe anybody anything, but knowing that at this season and the growth of the company, it's needed to be done, and just trusting that with cash flows, and everything that goes along with such a project, things would be there, and we've just been continued to be blessed through that. So I would say the seeds are planted just in reflection of how much has been given to us. The opportunities, I had to work at those, but those were given to me. Okay. Both the relationships and the financial aspect. And I'm very aware of that. So we are at the point now, and I would say, especially in the last 2 to 3 years, just in many ways looking for opportunities on how we can give back, and have partnered, probably, I'd say, the last 5 to 6 years quite strongly with a few groups. We definitely know there's needs throughout the world, near and far. I do have a heart for more local type opportunities. We spend a fair bit of time partnering with Water Street Mission in Lancaster. We've developed a lot of good, solid friendships there, and have seen a lot of growth and opportunity, and do strongly believe in their mission. That's one area where we spend a lot of time and feel like we've been able to share that with our children, because we do consider, when we look at opportunities to be generous, how can we include everybody? And coming into a season now where I'm also trying to navigate what that looks like to communicate and share that more with the company, and include my trusted team and our entire employee base. So it's been growing, and we're kind of at a season now where I'm being challenged and convicted often as well. So
Yeah. How many employees do you have now, ballpark?
So we're right at around 50 employees.
Okay. So I kind of like this, because I think we tend to have people a little later in their career, probably on the podcast. But I think this is really important, because there are a lot of people kind of in your shoes where things are starting to go well. It sounds like you're getting freed up a little bit from having to work so hard in the business, like so many hours. It sounds like you've been working on the business some to be able to give yourself a little higher level view. Is that fair?
That is fair.
And then with that, okay, also a little bit of space to recognize the gifts you've received, if you will, like, I'm good with customers, but God's provided some of these resources as well. And so anyway, I think that's a place where a lot of the folks listening to this can identify with, is we don't have it all figured out. We're starting to do some things, and we maybe like to get the employees involved. Are they yet involved, or how are you thinking about getting them involved if they're not?
So on a very light level, I would say, for the last year to 2 to 3, I've certainly communicated more my openness to any opportunities that the employees would consider even bringing to me, that maybe they would like to see us support, sponsor, whatever the right term would be. But then also more openly sharing relationships, like I just mentioned, with Water Street Mission. And I would say we haven't done that enough. Maybe I have taken that task along with my wife, Margaret, mostly just the two of us, and probably haven't over communicated it. I had a situation, being totally transparent, this past construction season. I said the past construction season in 2024, where one of our opportunities to to give back and support. In this case, ministries, and in particular camps. Okay, different retreats. A lot of those camps are remote. As far as energy sources, propane can be a popular one. There's usually not natural gas, but there could even be lacking of electricity there. And it's been really fun. There's been several camps. We had one even down in Georgia. We've had some in the Poconos, just through relationships where we've been able to donate tanks and equipment, and just see the sincere thankfulness when we do that, and knowing that it's going to support ministries that just are changing, whether it be young children's lives or people with whatever issues that there may be. One of the other opportunities is a big part of our business is removing and relocating the large used storage tanks. We do sell and install new and used refurbished, but sometimes in the processing of these tanks, we're able to acquire a large amounts of propane, the actual gas itself. And again, as of late, I had been focusing on, hey, where can I potentially donate this gas? We have a couple of believing partners that have trucking companies that haul the propane gas. We don't haul it ourselves, but where they were willing to say, hey, let's talk about an avenue where this product can go. We'll help you deliver it. That will be part of their support to the ministry. And again, we would donate this gas. And I had been doing some of these things behind the scenes, truthfully. Like, this is an example of some of the things that happen in a business where I could have sold that gas to anybody and probably collected cash for the gas or whatever the case may be, but knew in my heart there was a home for it. And again, in some very quick discussions, the opportunities were there, but did all of this without sharing it with anybody in the company, to be truthful with you. Maybe some of that is a humbleness. Maybe a lot of it is I love to do things and nobody know about it. And that becomes harder and harder as a business grows, and especially when the financial numbers are much larger. There's accounting reasons that people need to know. There's just honestly transparency with leadership teams. And I felt on my heart at an off-campus meeting that we had with our leadership team. Actually, it was our managers, and there was probably 12 people in the room, and it was just weighing on me. And, it wasn't on the agenda, and we were getting ready to break for lunch, and kind of the meeting had stopped and everybody was going to go. And I just had to hold the room and just said, guys, I need to share something with you. And it was extremely emotional. It was odd. Like, I just was so choked up to tell them that, hey, I feel in a way maybe I had taken things out of something out of your pocket. I've done this. I don't know why I didn't share it with you all. I'm sharing it with you now. But just like, that was one of the big, turning points in 2024, to where I was like, I really need to be okay with people knowing. I need to be okay with sharing it with the team. I need to be okay with even giving them opportunities again to help with processing, for example, that gas or some of these tank donation things. So I love that it's not all about just donating funds and cash. There is opportunities to do that, but also some of our equipment and our services. And I would say still I have a long way to go with how I openly share that with the group and what that looks like. But I feel like that's part of the current journey that I'm on.
Well, thanks for sharing that. I think I wrote down the word journey. So I'm glad you finished that with talking about the journey you're on. I mean, I was just jotting down, sort of the process. I think people are really going to relate to your story because you're in the middle of it, frankly. Maybe even the early stages, if for some listeners. But I think you talked about recognizing, sort of the stages of the journey. Kind of pulling your head up. There's nothing like starting a business where you're just all in. Just frankly, we just want it to survive and thrive. There's a kind of a survival, and like, I got to make it. Okay. That's so right. There's and of course we sort of pull our heads up and go, wow, I probably should have been a little more balanced, as you say, or conscious of maybe confident, more faithful, or whatever it is. that makes us in our human flesh try to make it work. I think everybody can relate to that. But a recognition, what God's done.
Yeah.
And then the second thing I wrote down is like, well, how do you respond now that you're thankful for it? Well, what's your response? And I think I really like your stories about using the business that you've got, the propane, the tanks, your expertise on installing these things. And I call that sort of asking, like God said to Moses, what's in your hand? Because Moses felt kind of under resourced. He's like, you got everything you need. That staff can do a lot of things, So your propane tanks and your propane can do a lot of things. And then
So true.
and then this journey of sort of sounds like it was a very personal journey. And then you feel led to share it. And why is that emotional? Well, probably because the reaction in the room was probably a lot more maybe positive. Is that fair to say than you expected? What do you think made that emotional?
Well, it was extremely positive. Well, what made it emotional was the Holy Spirit working in me and nudging me to say, okay, share this with the group, right? Don't be shy. Don't be, if it's humbleness, I don't want to go around saying, Matt Hiltz is extremely humble. It's just, this is just how I operate. And maybe some of this stuff is close to the sleeve, but absolutely felt a nudge. And in communicating that with the group, just, I guess that was just the heart of it pouring out. And probably in hindsight, it was good for them to see how important these things were to me and how serious I am about it. And it's been kind of cool because we rolled into some annual planning sessions in January this year, and that discussion was still it hadn't been too long prior to that, and where we started looking at our core focuses and our 10-year targets and starting to say, hey, why don't we talk about this a little bit and maybe rethink this. And I was struggling with, my goal has never been to have an extremely large company to hit a big revenue number. Our company has grown just through relationships, and I feel doing the right thing, being responsive, being reliable, being trustworthy. And as our customer base has grown, we've grown with them. I probably do have that issue of not being able to say no. So some of that does play into that, but it has never been the drive to be an extremely large company. And I'm not sure under my tenure it ever will be, but it has just grown. And just as we look ahead at trying to set 10-year targets when, top line revenue numbers to me, just right, wrong, or indifferent, aren't that important. Okay. I do realize that the more we can earn, the more opportunity I will have to steward those earnings. And I'm understanding that. But I would also say that, I'm also very satisfied with where we're at, and I'd love to figure out a way to do less work and make more money, if that makes sense. So a lot goes into these 10-year targets, but to where I suppose that day mid last year when I showed the heart to the leadership team, they started pushing me and saying, okay, this is what we're all about. Let's look at this 10-year target and let's talk generosity. Let's talk sustainability of a company, but then how can we be recognized through our actions as being the most generous. And it's been kind of cool. So the ability to share that with the group and then see how we're building on that up until this point is pretty cool. So more to come on that.
I love it. I think in this journey of, shall we say, becoming a generous business owner, none of us would call ourselves that, but we aspire to it. A title such as that. There are different markers along the journey, and I think for most people, especially the people who start it themselves, there's that period of just total dedication to make sure the baby is healthy. But then as you kind of get more mature, these stages, and even sharing kind of your heart about giving and that sort of thing. I know for me, it was such a personal journey. I wasn't sure if anyone else would care, to be honest. But I was also pleasantly surprised at how everyone else sort of picked up on it. Uh, and then as a group, we sort of formed values. It sounds like that's kind of what's going on. They're sort of picking up, taking your lead, but you know, so I think it sounds like you're on a journey of being pleasantly surprised at how your team is sort of embracing those values that you hold dear that you're clearly living out. And none of that, I'm sure, would be a surprise to them necessarily.
Right.
Maybe some of the facts, but directionally, I have a feeling, and it sounds like they're being galvanized by that. And so we've seen other people who that there are other markers that are really fun along the way where they start picking up the mantle and doing some things even without you, with your blessing, you know.
Sure.
But so that you kind of look forward to that happening.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I totally do. So, no, I'm excited. I'll share one more story here,
Yeah.
and it was just recent. At our church, they did a service or message, I would say, on tithing. This was probably a month ago now, and one of the props that they used, which helps, it helps people to visualize the tithing, where they had multiple people come out on stage, and they were bearing, fruits and vegetables, and they had two tables set up, and they had one individual that was coming up and placing their fruit or vegetable on one table, and then the rest of the group were placing it on the second table, and that was representative of tithing and the first 10%, going to the Lord. And they continued to do this. Had people come out on stage, and the fruit and vegetables were piling up. And I think really what they were trying to show people is, hey, this is what we're told to do. This is what's important. This is what it looks like. But also be aware that, this 10%, when you compare it to how much we have left to sustain and to use for self, and just, where I was convicted by watching that was just how little that 10% looked like compared to the 90 that was on the table beside it, and to where I felt like even if I was to double that 10%, how still that would be so little in comparison, and challenge me to consider ways that I can increase, my giving and my contributions and the way I steward. And maybe wouldn't it be cool as the company grows, if we're so blessed, to where we could live and sustain off of the 10 or 20%, and eventually be able to give the rest of it to people in the community around the world that do need it more than we do. And that really did hit me during that message, and I've thought about it a lot since then. So just continuing right now to be convicted along those lines. And I'm excited. I'm excited to talk openly with it about people. I mean, maybe people hearing this podcast, and maybe there will be people, employees that I know, and maybe this is one way to even share my heart more with them. But just feel like you're right. Like it's just the beginning of the journey, in my opinion.
Well, I'm excited for you because God does not give that kind of inspiration for no reason. So the journey continues for you, and I'm excited to see where it goes. Well, as we kind of wrap up, Matt, what we always try to close with is just some practical tip. And you've been just so transparent, and I'm very appreciative of that, about the steps of your journey, where you've gone and where God's challenging you. But for somebody behind you, maybe they're just coming out of that buried time, where they're poking their head up and going, I'm pretty sure I need to start, it's okay. Start getting out of the weeds a little bit and trying to thoughtfully use this as a platform. What's just a practical tip you might leave with somebody running on the treadmill who wants to implement something tomorrow?
Balance, work-life balance. Work towards it as early on in your career as you possibly can. You won't regret it. The work, the customer relationships, it will take care of itself if you can focus and get your priorities straight, and really, really work on your faith, work on your relationships with your family, with your spouse in particular. This owning and running and growing a business is hard work, and it's hard on more than just the business owner. It can be hard on the family, on relationships, and just understand that those are the most important things, and that your business, your career will be successful if those areas are healthy. That would absolutely be my advice to anybody coming up and following me.
I think that's so powerful because I think there's a general, why do we work so hard early days? Some of it might, I'll just say it for me, maybe it was a lack of faith. That I have to work the extra hours because, God can't fill it in. You know what I mean? I've got to make it happen, when in reality, God's making it happen anyway. Right. So
you just said it though, you making it happen, I making it happen, and how much we think we completely own that.
Right.
And there's even days now where I know my actions or reactions stem from the fact that I'm trying to do it on my own.
Exactly.
And I know that too isn't a sustainable mindset, right? Because we can't do it on our own. And truthfully, we never did. But I wish I could have given so much more of it up sooner. And again, the journey continues. I'm not perfect today, and I'm continuing to learn in that space and time. So,
well, again, thanks for sharing your journey. Matt, thanks so much for being with us today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And thanks everybody for joining us on this week's Generous Business Owner Podcast. Subscribe, share it with a friend, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Generous Business Owner Podcast with Jeff Thomas, Alan Barnhart, and Jeff Rutt. Make sure to follow the podcast so you don't miss an episode. You can find the guest contact information in the show notes. Stay tuned for the next episode.